All right, today we are pulling back the curtain on the one thing that turns a chaotic idea into a crystal clear launch, the project plan. It really is the secret sauce behind pretty much every success story. Let's get into it.
You know that feeling, right? You download a new app or you log into some new website and it just works. Every button, every feature, it's all seamless. But how does that actually happen? How do these huge teams deliver something so complex, on time, without the whole thing just falling apart?
Well, it's not magic, and it is definitely not luck. The secret is a deliberate, carefully thought out, and super detailed plan. That's the roadmap that turns a great idea into a product that actually works.
So why go to all this trouble? Well, think about it this way. You would never, ever build a skyscraper without a blueprint, right? A project plan is exactly that. It's the blueprint for your software. It makes sure everyone is building the same thing in the same way.
It really all boils down to three huge functions. First, it forces you to think through every single detail, which helps you catch problems before they even happen. Second, it's a communication tool. It gets everybody on the same page, which prevents all kinds of expensive misunderstandings. And third, when things change, and trust me, they always do, the plan gives you a solid foundation to adapt from, instead of just, panicking.
This quote really gets to the heart of it. Just the act of writing the plan down, of putting your whole strategy into words, forces a level of understanding you just can't get from talking about it. If you can't explain it clearly on paper, you probably don't understand it well enough yourself. Okay, so we're sold on why we need a plan, but what actually goes in one of these things? The best plans aren't just a big to-do list. They're really a series of answers to some very important questions you have to ask before you even start. A really solid plan just doesn't leave any room for guessing. It defines clear boundaries, what's in scope, and, just as importantly, what is out of scope. It sets clear goals, it calls out the biggest risks right up front, and it acknowledges the real-world stuff like time and money. The whole point is to have answers to all of this before anyone writes a single line of code. And this isn't just guesswork, by the way. Professionals use industry-standard templates, kind of like this one from the IEEE, that basically act as a giant checklist. You don't have to reinvent the wheel here. These frameworks make sure you're not forgetting any of those critical questions. Now for what is, let's be honest, often the hardest part of any plan, estimation. This is where you have to predict the future, trying to figure out how much time, effort, and money a project is actually going to take. It's definitely part art and part science. And here's something crucial. Estimation isn't something you just do once at the very beginning and then forget about. No, it's a continuous process. As you move through the project, from planning to design to execution, your estimates should be getting more and more accurate over time. So where do you even start? Well, you break the mountain down into hills, and then you break those hills down into rocks. It's called a work breakdown structure. You take this massive goal, like build an app, and you break it down into every single stage, activity, and tiny little task it takes to get there. So once you have this huge list of tasks, how do you put a number on them? Well, there are basically two main schools of thought on this. Two different paths you can take to get to your final estimate. They're called top-down and bottom-up. The top-down approach is, well, exactly what it sounds like. You start from that 30,000-foot view. Based on experience or maybe a similar project from the past, a leader just decides on a total budget or timeline for the entire project. Then that total gets sliced up and handed out to the different teams. The huge advantage here is speed. It's fantastic for that early stage planning when you just need a ballpark number to get started. The downside? It's way less accurate. By starting from the top, you're almost guaranteed to miss some of those tricky little details hiding down in the weeds. And then, of course, you have the total opposite approach, bottom up. Here, you start on the ground floor with all those little individual rocks. You estimate every single tiny task from your work breakdown structure, and then you just add them all up to get your grand total. Now, the payoff for all that detailed work is accuracy. The final number is way more likely to be right, and it gives you a much clearer picture of what you actually need. The catch? It is incredibly time-consuming, and it means you have to know a lot of details right up front, details you might not have at the very beginning of a project. Theory is great, but let's make this a little more real. Imagine we're building a brand new online learning platform from scratch. How would each of these methods tackle? Okay, so using the top-down approach, management might look at a similar platform they built a few years ago. They'll adjust for a few things and say, you know what, this feels like a 10-month, $500,000 project. Then that $500,000 just gets sliced up, with different portions going to design, development, testing, and so on. And there you have it, a single, clean number. $500,000. It's quick, it's decisive, and it gives everybody an immediate budget to start working with.
Now, let's hit rewind and try the bottom-up approach. This time, the team sits down and lists out everything. User research, wireframing, back-end development, database setup, every single task. Then, they estimate the hours and the cost for each one, from the tiniest to the biggest. After adding up hundreds of these little tasks, the total comes to $480,000. Now, it's pretty close to the top-down number, right? But this figure is born from detailed analysis, not just a high-level guess. It's a much more solid number because you can point to exactly where every single dollar came from.
So, which one is right? The truth is, most projects end up using a little bit of both. But this whole process, the planning, the estimating, it really forces you to face the fundamental challenge that's at the heart of any project. It's all a balancing act. It's a constant tug-of-war between four competing things. If you want more features, that's probably going to increase the budget or the schedule. If you need to hit a tight deadline, you might have to cut some features, or maybe even compromise on quality. A good plan doesn't make these problems disappear, it just gives you the information you need to manage them intelligently.
And that leaves us with one last question. In a world that is obsessed with moving fast and breaking things, is this kind of detailed planning becoming obsolete? Or, when things are moving faster than ever, is having a clear blueprint and a realistic estimate not just a luxury, but an absolute necessity? What do you think?